Hello, and welcome to the Code 60 podcast, the show in which motorsport is discussed, even if we accidentally sometimes go off on a tangent about it. In this podcast, we end up talking about F1's wet tyres, their new launch show, NASCAR's Play-Off format, and various goings-on in the world of sports cars. However, for this episode, Lambo gave me the idea of doing this intro separate from the podcast itself. A good idea in principle, but as you're about to hear, I kind of get so wrapped up in the idea that we're going to go straight to talking about racing that I kind of forget to introduce Lambo properly. Also, Steph couldn't make it as he was busy. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the show. Right, with that, we are now joined by Lambo as, well, Steph Steph can't be here. Apparently he's found something that's more interesting and more important than the Code 60. I'm shaking my head. But fair enough. Anyway, we've got some things to talk about. I'll start off with, because this is going to be spoilers, sports car heavy episode potentially, which I know with the Code 60 does kind of sound about right, because Code 60 is mostly associated with sports cars, but we do try and talk about all kinds of different racing things on this show. But we're going to begin with NASCAR on that basis. So last week, they obviously had their championship finale. I'm not going to talk about the race because it's been talked about to a huge extent. And, you know, with the greatest respects, it was like an okay race. And I'm not even going to get into the driver who won and all that sort of thing. It has brought the playoff format as a whole into some sort of, well, contention. I'll put it mildly. And about every single person that I see on the NASCAR side of things is in some form or another, talking about it. So, when we have so many playoff ideas in the first place, why not add another one? But anyway, so with that in mind, I've come up with an idea. Now, I will say that in an ideal world, for me, I would have a regular, normal championship season as it was from 2003 to prior. From then on, I like the 10 race chase is okay, just about manageable for me, but that's what I would ideally want. A normal championship like most others, apart from now the V8 supercars. That aside, though, with the greatest of respects, though, it is highly unlikely we're going to go back to those days. So, with that in mind, and also bearing in mind what happened at Martinsville, whilst I don't particularly like some of the ideas that even myself have come up with, it's one that I could potentially see happening in certain respects. But with that in mind, I'll go through it. There should be something up on the screen, but it's hard to explain anyway. The first 26 races will work like it currently does, with one change, and that is, if you win, you're not automatically in the playoffs. I don't particularly like this as a whole throughout the whole of the season, because, well, one, it doesn't award consistency, but then secondly, once you've won, and especially as you're not necessarily going to be a team that, you know, let's say you're Harrison Burton, for example, okay? He wins at Daytona, and most of the year he hadn't really been, with the utmost respect to him, he hadn't been all that competitive. And that car isn't usually all that competitive. So if a team wins, especially early on in the year, then it doesn't necessarily give them an incentive to think, oh, well, let's just try and aim for another victory. And if you aim for a victory, which I'm sure every team does, at the very least, the worst case scenario is that you at least try and achieve a result that is as good as possible, which then helps in the championship, clearly. So I don't see why winning you're in makes a huge amount of difference or makes any good difference anyway to a driver wanting to or a driver or a team wanting to constantly win races, so to speak, or at least, you know, put all their efforts onto the races after they've won, because then they'll just dedicate it to the playoffs, or the playoffs as it currently is. So I get rid of that. Then this is the bit which I mean, already Lambo has accept not particularly like this, and I don't particularly like this bit either, as we've sort of went
Well,
over it.
yes, I exist, and I do dislike. Well, not dislike it, but I think it's unlikely
Yeah,
that the. I don't even think the other brands would go along with this idea that you sort of restrict who will be in it depending on the car brand. I mean, I just want to say about the win and you're in. I think the win and you're in is sort of an idea because, if you win, then you are remembered, sort of, as in, it makes it, you have some kind of name recognition, some kind of, you know, award for winning a race. I can see why they have that system in place. It doesn't award consistency, but it does award, winning, which, is, I think, usually what people tend to like and tend to remember. They don't really remember if you finish consistently unless you're like a fan.
yeah.
So it's, it's, I kind of agree with, well, not agree, but I understand the way that it is. I don't think it's inherently bad if we have to keep this playoff system, which is stupid. I mean, the thing is, with I'm just going to go back to just talking in general about the playoffs, which is, I saw the points if they went back to a full regular season, no playoffs. This is the Winston Cup Series, or
Whatever it was, sort of
like that the Bell would have won the championship by 5 points over, I think, William Byron in that scenario. I'm like, is that not exciting enough? Would it not be exciting enough if someone wins by 5 points over the other? And also, I have to say, in that scenario, Joey Logano finished in 11th place overall in the Winston Cup championship over the whole season.
It's like, and if I recall correctly, and firstly, sorry for talking so much at the start. I probably should have got you in more, but
I'm like, where's my intro?
I know. Sorry,
never mind.
Sorry, it was. Sorry, it was. I kind of got.
Okay.
Yeah, I got on a tangent. You see, you should know this on my channel. Anyway, but very briefly, I will say, if I recall correctly from the tweet which showed the final standings, I think it even showed that Christopher Bell had actually overtaken. I think it was actually Chase Elliott who was second, but it said that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
it
think
was
it said
Chase
that.
Elliott. I was mind blanking on like who, and I just said name.
A Hendrick driver. Who? Yeah, it was. I'm fairly sure it said, and in the edit, I'll correct this, or I'll show this, but it's. I'm fairly sure it says that Bell would have actually overtaken Elliott in the last race.
Yeah,
And
makes sense.
got that 5-point advantage. Like, how is that not exciting? Like you say, that is captivating. You're not going to get it every year,
Yeah.
but that's racing. Am I going a bit crazy, or am I a bit traditionalist, or something like that? I don't understand. But I don't know.
Sorry, William Byron was third, so I was just confusing it in my mind.
Yeah, oh, you're close
and
enough.
Reddick was fourth. Yeah,
yeah, even you're close enough. It's fine. It's, but yeah, it's like, yeah, I didn't necessarily want the conversation to sort of be, why can't we go back to how it was?
Yeah, I know. We want to propose a new format, so
yeah,
I can understand.
It's kind of like, well, this is what I'd like it to be, but I kind of have to accept that it's not, in all likelihood, unless that, like, we try another load of playoff formats, and maybe in like 20 or 25 years time, if the fandom is still overly negative or becomes somehow even more negative, which to be fair, I'm sure it could be if more things like Logano's championship happen. And just very
Yeah.
quickly,
Well, I mean,
Logano's win with the current, he's a deserving champion because he played the game or played the
mhm,
format as it was. Whether you like him or whether
yeah.
that's obviously a different thing. But
I,
he's deserving in the sense of how the championship was. But if we go by
yeah.
how the purity aspect, yeah,
I
it's
mean, I think the negative reaction kind of in general, you know, fanoverse that, it seems like it was pretty profoundly negative overall.
mm,
So I don't know. Um, obviously, I think even they said that they are, open to making changes,
which I
but
was
we don't know what the
glad to
changes
hear.
are now. I think that's a good step for sure. I think the reason that it sort of rubs people the wrong way too is that how are the championships equivalent? Like we have
Mm,
Logano who won when he needed to win and got the points when he needed to. But overall, he he finished 11th if we count the whole season with those old points. So
yeah,
it's kind of like, how is his championship equivalent to those older championships? How do we rank
exactly.
someone who wins when they need to but don't perform at any other point?
Yeah,
So
it's like,
it doesn't seem like it's equivalent. Someone who
and that,
who did well the whole season versus someone who only did well when they needed to, and those championships are equivalent. They're not really.
yeah, exactly. It's like, and also bear in mind that the wins that he did get, which again, obviously, there's skill in its own right to fuel saving, but um, people will potentially point out the about Nashville being, to a degree, a bit lucky because of how he managed to save the fuel that he did. He did win in the first round of the playoffs, but then technically was eliminated in the round of 12, if my mind is not going funky. And then got back in because Bowman was disqualified in Charlotte for an infringement of some kind.
Hmm.
And
Sounds
then,
right.
yeah, and then Logano gets back in, wins when he needs to, and then the rest is history basically. So there's like it's sort of in some ways like the style of the wins, and like it's not necessarily like you had potentially the fastest car overall, or you had one that could compete for a win on raw speed compared to others. It was more there was like it was like in part a luck based win. I mean, to me, I would always say that actually, if you're able to save fuel and win, then that's a very good and important skill in racing, especially in sports car racing. That's huge. But I appreciate that that is perhaps again from a purist style standpoint, it's maybe not. It's not like, oh well, the car that one a car that did or ran in the top five nearly all race didn't wasn't one of the victors at the end. So again, I see that it's and then you get sort of what happened in Martinsville and manufacturer stuff going on, which was part of the reason why I kind of did the idea in my playoff idea, which was slightly. Again, it's not necessarily that I like it, but it was a case of, well, if the manufacturers are spending as much money as they are apparently doing, and they obviously would like to get a car of theirs into the playoffs, because if you're outside of the playoffs, then you're going to get less airtime and screen time, and also it becomes less important for you to it becomes less important for you to race in a way, because you're then also conscious of being around the playoff drivers. So I thought, well, if you guarantee, let's say, instead of or like one or two drivers at the end of the year will have um oh what brain's gone blank. But basically, if you give them, two drivers from each manufacturer in at the end of what I would do as the final four, which I'll briefly come on to because it's slightly linked to other people's ideas, but maybe it's a slight tweak. Then at least it gives the manufacturers like some sort of thinking of, oh well, we don't necessarily have to have blocker drivers or like drivers who are helping a manufacturer ally, so to speak. We don't have to do that because we are guaranteed to at least be in the playoffs or be in the at the end and have two drivers. So again, purist
I
from a
get the
traditional.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah,
I get your thinking. You're trying to like stop that from happening. I think it's sort of difficult because I think the manufacturers are kind of like, well, I kind of would like all my drivers to be there and not anyone else's if possible. That might not happen, but I think they would mostly be kind of like selfish of, I want to race for the fact that I want to have all my drivers in the championship hunt and
that's
no one
true.
else, right? So, but I can see, how you want to balance it, and it gets tricky when you start talking about like adding points and stuff like that. Then it kind of seems like unfair, but I get the idea.
And I have to say, I'm so I tell you what, I'm really glad. This is why I'm so glad that we have other people on this podcast because you've given me an angle I totally didn't realize, and now I think, oh, well, actually, that kind of renders my idea somewhat obsolete. But
Well, I mean, it's just an idea. I mean,
no, but no, it's a really good idea though. That's it's a good idea. Like that concept. You're not even necessarily giving an idea. Your concept or like your alternative way of thinking is a side that I had completely forgotten about, but actually does make total sense. I mean, if I am Chevrolet, Toyota, or Ford, I'm thinking I don't want any of those other brands to be shown off. I just want people to recognize that Ford or whatever is totally in control of the championship four at the end.
for sure.
So
Yeah.
no, I do that aspect, and actually that probably would create. Well, it may create team orders, but at the same
Yeah,
time,
for sure.
maybe that's like a best of a bad situation in some respects.
Maybe.
So yeah, I guess the other final thing, again, this is not about the manufacturers, but the idea of the last four would be that the races, because again, I don't like the one race ending. I mean, it like it has been mentioned several times, the track can suit whoever basically, and there's so many variables to think about, and one race over the previous 30, it does in some ways render the 35 prior races a little bit pointless in some respects, but I mean obviously not totally, but that's what people have kind of alluded to. So my idea of four races would be that we would have basically one race at each sort of circuit that we go to, or type of track that we go to on the NASCAR calendar. So the first one would automatically be a super speedway, because let's kind of just get that out of the way, because there's so many variables with that. Then the rest would just be whatever NASCAR decides, which would either be the short oval, the intermediates, which is like the 1.5, not basically non-super speedway miles, non-super speedway style ovals, easy to say, and then a road course, and then in whatever order that is. I imagine you probably in that late of the year, you probably wouldn't be able to do the tracks in the north part of the country, which maybe I can understand. So perhaps Charlotte Roval or something like that. I'm not sure that'll be an interesting race in itself. But basically, that gives us a larger sample size, and it also gives a different. Each driver has to perform at a different style of track, basically, which simple-ish in concept. Where they would do that, people are saying 3 races. I mean, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy with anything other than one.
Yeah, that's basically.
I just wanted to bring up. I was talking with you beforehand about Kevin Harvick's idea. His idea was, and you said you forgot about it or whatever. What he said was, or didn't watch it, but he said basically that the top four of the regular season, like the format wouldn't change. The only difference would be so the person that wins the regular season is in the final four.
Yeah.
Or
Now it's
like,
all coming back to me.
and
Yeah.
then like its
And
second place would be in the final eight, third and
yeah.
12, fourth in the top 16, like guaranteed.
Yeah.
I guess it would be
That.
the final five or whatever. But anyway, that just I mean, it's just the same alliteration, so it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so, I mean, I think that's definitely better, and that it rewards whoever won, the regular season at least. But I do
Yeah.
think that
Exactly.
it could be the format could be improved. I would like the last races to be more than a one and done.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's really all that can
I
really
mean,
be
there's so
really
much that
said
can
about it.
happen. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so much in one race. There's so much there's so much that can happen in its own respect, and at the same time, it just feels like, yes, entertainment. Like on paper, entertainment wise, it should therefore make a very enthralling spectacle. But then I must admit, from every time we've used it or we've had this system, and I'm not even necessarily talking about Phoenix. I'd even include, to a degree, Homestead as. I mean, Homestead has created some really good races, but at the same time, um, even with this format, I wouldn't necessarily say that the final four, like when we've had the final four as an idea, there's never really been a race which is all that exciting or all that different to a race that had happened prior, which is just like, it's a thing that happens in motor racing. I mean, I obviously wish that every race was, something like a German Grand Prix in 2019 or an equivalent NASCAR race that about, for example, Kansas, the first Kansas race earlier this year. I thought that was fantastic, but you're not going to get that you're not going to get it every time. Sure, some tracks are better than others, but even good tracks don't necessarily mean that you're going to get a good race every time. So that's why I don't like how it is at the moment, and I hope that certainly the changes that, if it's being reported that there might be some changes that could come if we keep getting the reaction that it is or that it's currently getting, then it'll be smaller tweaks potentially for next season, and then 2026 is where we'd see something perhaps where we get beyond a one race championship finish, but we'll see. But anyway, I think
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of done what all the other, so a lot of other NASCAR based creators
For
or
sure.
sort of racing
For
content
sure.
creators have said in general. Like we've kind of in some ways flogged
Mhm.
this horse enough,
I think I
so
would
to
be
speak.
interested to hear what commenters would like if people comment on this
Yes,
video or the
exactly.
podcast, or I would love to hear what people think would be a good format. And
I think
I'd love to hear them roast your format in the comments.
Hi, post podcast tie-dye here. If you do indeed post a comment to say how bad my playoff format is, then I can totally understand. As we were discussing it further, I was beginning to hate my idea more and more. Anyway, voiceover over, back to the podcast. Right. With that,
You want to talk about the F1? Actually,
we can talk about.
I want to talk about a specific aspect of the F1 because I feel like most of it has been, done to death in
Yeah,
terms
go on
of
then.
conversation.
Go on
But
then. We can talk the F to the one and all that sort of thing. Yep.
so we're talking about Brazil, and I think, I'm not going to talk about most of the things. Max masterful drive for sure. Lando definitely faltered, but I do think that there's a car difference, right? I think
Yeah.
that the Red Bull just looked better in the wet than the McLaren. So
Hmm.
so there's also
Yeah.
that, right? There's lots of car differences in terms of how different people perform as well. It's not just the driver. I think different cars, the way they're set up or the way, how much wing they have, etc., definitely affects, the overall performance. And for sure, the McLaren did not look that good in the wet. and it didn't look like overtaking was really that possible.
Yeah,
I think they
it
were
wasn't
running
that
more
fast on the
wing.
straight. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I don't
wasn't that
know.
fast on the straights, was it, the
No,
McLaren? So specific struggle to get past Mercedes, which I thought the Mercedes wasn't typically that strong in a straight line throughout most of the year either.
for
So
sure. So
probably added wing angle from the
yeah.
McLarens
So
to try and compensate, but
there's
clearly didn't work.
there's that. I know. I really want to talk about more. Well, a few things. One, I don't. The rookies. Well,
Mm.
they had a rough time overall.
It was
Mostly,
it was a rough.
Lawson did okay,
Yeah,
but
he did.
he was he was roughed up a bit and stuff. But it was sort of obviously even Albon had his own problems in qualifying and stuff before the race, and then Colapinto crashes
Behind the safety
in the
car.
behind the safety car.
Yeah, it was.
I think obviously there's a lot of talk about the red flag, and they got to change tires and stuff like that. Because I think Lando and Russell, they came in, they pitted for new intermediates, and I think that was the correct strategy. It didn't turn out to be the correct strategy because there was a red flag, and everybody in front of them got to change tires for free. Not to say that they were actually going really quickly, even on those old Inters. They were still making them work. So I can't really fault it, but it leads into what I want to really talk about, which is at that point, I was about to say Toro Rosso, the RV.
Yep.
They pitted for wets, and I think even that was probably dependent, based on the amount of rain that was about to fall, was also probably maybe the right call. Though that leads into the next part, which is anytime that in F1, when you have to actually use the wets, is usually when someone crashes, and
Yes.
and that is because you are, because of the way things are in F1, you obviously don't want to pit. And
No.
at the moment that, there's everybody out there on intermediates and the tread is wearing down and they're getting less and less water, I don't know, hydroplaning resistance, let's say, there's less water being diverted away. So at that point, it's just becoming more and more dangerous out there.
Yes.
If there's going to be more rain, then people are going to crash, almost certainly. So,
In all likelihood, yes.
because they're just not going to come in. They're just not. They're just going to run as long as they possibly can, and then they're just going to wipe out, which they did. So it's Bernie in the race said something about going to wets and stuff like that, and I'm like, there's no point going to wet because and it's just if you go onto wets, the race is going to be stopped because someone's going to be on intermediates and wipe out. So, and then that happened, and to me, it's just, I don't know. It's one of those things where, obviously it's up to the judgment of the driver to come in or to not, but in those tricky conditions, it's very difficult to come up with a winning strategy because someone is going to gamble on being able to make it on just the regular intermediates or worn down intermediates, and they're not going to be able to. So that really becomes a really risky strategy game.
Basically,
And the fact that you get to take free tires is sort of like during a red flag is, I get it's for safety and stuff, and that kind of makes sense in the wet conditions. But obviously, it doesn't really feel fair overall. But you know, it doesn't feel fair. But on the flip side, the people that stayed out and on those older intermediates were still very quick. So in some sense, they deserve that position as well. So there's
Hmm.
different ways to looking at it. I think I don't really know what to make of how do you stop people from staying out too long?
Hmm.
One would say, obviously you can't, but how do you stop people from taking such a huge risk? And I don't know. Maybe we don't want to, because that's part of F1. You want people to take risks,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
obviously it's their performance on the line.
Hmm.
But there's always going to be people that are going to and cause a safety car or red flag. So yeah.
I think I perhaps you could say. I mean, there is like some. Again, this would perhaps come with a little bit of not jeopardy, but it would be in some ways controversial in different respects because, well, the idea that I'm about to suggest, which is the race control, like, can put out a mandatory sort of race control message to say wet tires must be put on at the soonest opportunity. So basically, if at some point on lap 27, you must, you then must, or well, actually, no. Basically, as soon as as soon as we deem, or we as the stewards or race control deem that conditions are to a point where being on intermediates is too risky, or you could even say, like, preempting that if heavier rain is going to come, you could say, to save you from staying out on the intermediate tires, which is less suitable, and if the forecast is indicating it will be, then we'll save you from yourselves, and you must go onto wet tires as quickly as you can. I know that may create a lot of double stacks, which in itself could be a bit
Yeah.
problematic, but I think that would potentially be a way of like keeping a race, or at least attempting to make a race stay green, or at least not go to safety car, or even at least they can trundle around the safety car, because the
Mhm.
really really heavy rain stopped after about 5 minutes, and then
Mhm.
I think obviously Colapinto did bring out the eventual red flag, but I think
Yeah.
if they'd have carried on and no one would have aquaplaned off or whatever, I think if you give it 5 to 7 laps, they're probably on wet tires, or maybe if you're bold enough to stay on intermediates, then potentially you could then restart the race in full green conditions. But it's yeah, I see what you mean, because
It's
obviously
really
the issue
difficult.
because the
Yeah.
issue is the issue is, as I think you've sort of alluded to, that no one necessarily wants to go onto the wet tires, because whilst they serve a purpose in a very specific circumstance, which is quite a rare one, and because it has in its own way a fairly narrow window of performance where it is better
Mhm.
than an intermediate, and because the intermediate is perhaps too good, because
Yeah. It is
I
it
know
is too
I,
good, or like
like in Canada, they were basically running when nearly all the track bar, like the first little complex bit, had a very dry line. And like, I'm not even actually no, not necessarily even a dry line. Like nearly like half of the track had dry portions. The back straight before the Wall of Champions chicane was almost entirely dry, and
Mhm.
yet they were still out on intermediates because one. And to be honest,
It was
I still.
slippery, so I think that's the real reason, is just, slippery
Yeah,
track,
that is true. Yeah,
so if you go offline just a little bit, there's less
yeah,
risk if
yeah,
you're on intermediates. Then,
yeah,
as I said, I like your idea. I think, some people would say it's, manipulating the race. You want the
yeah.
teams to sort of adapt to the weather conditions, but the situation is
They sometimes
that
though
they're
say
not going
save the
to.
teams from themselves. Save the teams from doing
it's
that.
saving them from
So,
themselves. I don't know if we should do that because obviously it's
yeah,
it's entertainment, right? Um,
yeah,
it's one of those really tricky questions about what kind of racing do you want to see? What kind of do you think that people should be? You want to see people take risks. You want to see people, try to something different, like Haas took the wet tires at the beginning of Montreal when it was really wet, and they worked really well at first, and then were not good.
yeah, no,
So it's tricky. You don't really want to dictate what
no,
people can do. Part is the weather is going to change, and it could change at any moment, and it could be a split second of you're staying on intermediate tires too long and the tread is worn down and boom, it starts raining a little bit more. All of a sudden you're hydroplaning and there's nothing you can do, right? So
yeah, exactly.
it's so it's that's a safety issue, right?
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know, there should be some restriction on how long you can use them, or I don't know. There's a whole bunch of ideas you could think of.
It's trying to make it as natural.
But it's trying to make it as natural as possible when I don't think that's really possible. So maybe there is no solution. Maybe the solution is just we let them crash. maybe that is the solution. We just let them crash, and that's just it.
That's just this is how we make drivers learn. In wet conditions, I'm gonna this is okay to stay out, boss. It's all good, and then you learn the hard way. So no,
I mean, several drivers were learning the hard way, including Colapinto, and
Behrman.
Ollie Behrman had a baptism by fire.
I think if there is one aspect to being in some ways, and that was a voice break. In some ways, to be an unproven, not unproven talent. That's the wrong word. But if you've obviously when you're in Formula One, and especially coming up through the junior ranks, where wet weather isn't a totally common occurrence, and especially in F1 running, you get hardly because it's not as though you have a lot of control over whether there's water on the track or not.
Bernie Ecclestone sprinklers, they're coming back.
Yeah,
sprinklers on the track. Oh, that's
there we go. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. That this is how we fix young drivers getting experience in wet
there
conditions.
We go. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. This is you can learn so much by
solutions to problems that don't exist. That's this podcast.
Yeah, no, they should or we should just let them learn the hard way as well. But I think that's the one. Colapinto has been a revelation. I think we can all agree. To an extent, I guess. Behrman has been very, his Ferrari race was very solid. His Haas race again, very solid. And then ironically, in the practice and sprint qualifying, did pretty well. Again, in dry conditions. So it's not necessarily a track thing. I believe, it can just purely be the lack of knowledge of. And again, this is understandable.
In fairness, though, Hulkenberg wiped out as well, so we're not exactly we're not purely just slamming Behrman here.
Yeah,
but obviously he had. Yeah, so
and Stroll actually, and Alonso, so many crashed, but so many did. But it's but like you were saying, it's not easy for them, but certainly they probably learnt something. Whether they liked what they learnt is a different thing.
Maybe we should talk about the F1's launch event. We could go to that.
I mean, we could. I mean, I don't know.
Do we have anything to say?
It's not necessarily the sort of thing I'd actively want to go to per se. Like, I just like to go to
You're
an
right next
event
door, though.
for.
You just pop in. You're an influencer. Get in
I mean,
there.
you say that. I was actually about to say. I mean, F1. If you can, well, I haven't actually. Well, maybe at some point I'll have a. Well,
On
actually, no.
F1,
I say at
yeah,
some point
get in the
I'll have a
game,
business.
F1. We need to
Yes, let's.
get tie-dye in there
Do you know what?
to the event. Actually, never mind. The event is great, and I cannot wait to see this event.
Yes, we're not sponsored now, but we're not sponsored. But I mean, do you know what? Like, if I had to do something, because if it's right in saying that all the drivers will be there, one of the things I would do if I was invited there is, like, obviously, if all the content creators like have to like can do a piece with a driver or something like that. The funny thing the intended idea that I had actually genuinely thought of today. I mean, how sad am I? But that I genuinely thought of today. Let's do, make them do like a quiz where I'd show them pictures of old F1 cars or like old F1 cars, and they have to guess what was the team from based on the car and the livery. Now, I just, I think that would, we could show them the Colognes, the Minardis, the Manners, and all that sort of thing, and let them like. If I have to do it with all the F1 drivers, then or at least a selection of them, who knows? Who knows the most from that? And so we can get some different. One, we could sort of see how much knowledge of the nerdy side of F1 that these drivers have, and if F1, if you like that idea, then just say in the comments. I know I will eventually have an actual proper business email that you can use for more discreet inquiries. But yeah, this isn't sponsored, but great event, and also at the
Liberty
same time,
Media,
I
get
believe
on
if
it.
it's yeah. At the same time, I'm not sure even if this was sponsored, it'd make any difference because, as far as I'm aware, all the tickets have been sold anyway. So,
I'm
yeah,
sure they could squeeze you in.
I'm sure.
They
I
definitely
mean,
could.
yeah,
I mean, I'd
I
be
mean,
interested. You, asking the drivers, with some old F1 questions would definitely be on brand for
it would be,
for
it would
you.
be so on brand. It, part of the reasons why I wanted to do a YouTube channel in some ways was because I wanted in some ways to go down a journalistic style route with with what I was doing, because I listened to press conferences and I always thought I was hearing very similar questions, and some of them I thought they're intended in a way whether they're intended or not, but it's up to, I guess it's up to interpretation. But I always thought, some of them, when you hear a question get asked, the driver looks sort of a bit, sort of not interested to give give an answer, or just look sort of a bit like miserable in some ways during a press conference, which I understand. But I guess for me, with YouTube, I guess being a sort of access point to that, if I was ever in a position where I could sort of talk to an F1 driver, or just talk to any literally any racing driver, really, in any respect, we can sort of untap a sort of a fun side to this and sort of say, how, it doesn't necessarily matter how your season is. Do you know what car this is? It's a 2001 Minardi, but do you know what this is? And then, like, we can sort of see a more sort of funny side, and then like hopefully drivers would enjoy sort of a more kind of light-hearted side to their. But yes, they are privileged in the job that they get to race in Formula One in different respects, but there is pressures. So let's.
You're just gonna be the new what is it called, the Gorilla Grid or whatever they do on
Yeah,
YouTube.
it's like,
You're the new host for
yeah,
Gorilla Grid.
Yeah, grill the nerdy grid.
Yeah,
Nerdy grill the grid. We're not going. We're not going about, like, we're not going to hear Prost several times, and no disrespect to the greats, but let's let's try and do you remember what engine partner, which Japanese car brand partnered with the small Italian team Coloni in the late 90s? Was it late 80s or early 90s? It's something like that.
You're talking about Subaru.
Yes, Subaru.
Yeah.
Yes, was it 18? It was either 89 or 90. I know 91. That was.
Yeah, I think you're in the right.
It's
frame.
definitely one of those 2 years. I know, because I think it only lasted 4 or 5 years, something like that. if content creators are allowed there, why not? Let's let the drivers sort of see if they know that
Have
sort
my
of thing.
number. Yeah, it is just a livery reveal, which fair enough. That is basically what teams were revealing anyway.
Yeah.
When they did, there was tons of reveals during, I'm just talking about previous years now.
Yeah.
Usually when they reveal it, they usually, talk for a while about the new car and sponsors, etc. And then they unveil the car, and it'll be completely different by the time they do the first test. And or it won't, or won't resemble anything that they originally show, which is fine. I get that they're trying. It didn't used to be the case. They used to actually unveil the car, but it slowly morphed into just like a livery reveal, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
I think the part of I don't really get why the teams would like this format is it gives sort of like less highlight to their sponsors and etc. I guess maybe the thinking is that this is like sort of like a big huge event and then you get more notice, but I feel like teams have tons of like partners and smaller partners and stuff like that, and in a kind of like individual press conference you can sort of give acknowledgement of even smaller partners to the team, whereas in this big super thing with Justin Bieber and whatever, maybe not so much, but fair enough if people are interested in seeing that, and I don't really know what it'll be like. I don't really know what to expect. The prices seem steep for just seeing something like that, but it's hard to really know because it's the first one, so who knows?
I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, and I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to keep the door open for business opportunities. But like, it's like I just sort of, it's like I can see why this could work. It might just be a bit more, give a more structured sort of show, so to speak, or just a more show revealing all the liveries and so on. So I guess I
don't want to be too negative about it because I don't like I will say this, I wouldn't want to go and
it's not,
I'm not that kind of fan that I would receive any kind of I guess it would, if I was there, it would be kind of neat to see the drivers and some resemblance of the car and stuff like that, if I'm not going to get the chance to see them in real life. Although I would say it takes place in the UK, and I think I would much rather go to Silverstone than go to this event. But
go to the O2.
The obviously the race is a lot more money than going to this event. So I guess there is that.
There is, it's like it's the sort of thing of which, like, and again, this is not, I'm not saying this because of the business thing side of things, but it's like if someone did sort of invite me, or like a friend had a spare ticket and their another friend pulled out or whatever, or just didn't feel well, and if someone invited me, then I'd be like, if you don't mind me being there, then fine, I'd do so. But
sure.
it's not like I wouldn't actively do that. And also I'm not really comfortable in cities, so if it's as it's in the O2, I'm kind of like
you don't want to be surrounded by all your fellow influencers. That's the scariest part of all.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, in the future, we plan on in the future, I'd like to. Well, our plan is to try and have, whether that be drivers, team members, or other content creators on this channel. I mean, speaking to them via a Discord call for me would be like kind of it makes you sort of go ah. So like being in person, if I met like Matt Gallagher from P1, or I mean, I don't know why Fair Race would go, but or would be invited to. I mean, he should be, but I don't. As he's not, as he's not, I guess, an F1 specified creator in a way. Then I'm not sure why he'd be involved. But if he was, whilst I'm sure,
I got invited to like Formula E stuff, and he did some things there.
Yeah,
he commentated on something.
Yeah,
virtual, maybe on the virtual ones. There was like
he commentated.
He commentated on it. Yeah.
Yes, I remember
was great.
watching that.
But
he was brilliant. he was
He's a great
really
commentator. So
amazing. I'm amazed that he's well. In some ways, not amazed, but he. I mean, I'm kind of getting off topic, but I don't mind because it's my favorite YouTuber, so I don't care. He really does. Genuinely, he can. He is so good with his words and describe like clear explanations in a sort of a sport where it's not so easy to give kind of like crystal clear information on like something so
Mhm.
dynamic. And during that Formula E race, he was fantastic. So yeah, I mean, if you are a racing series, if you're like the head of a racing series or whatever, and well, I mean, I don't have any contact. Well, maybe. Well, Lambo has slightly more contact with Alex in some respects than I do. But if you do, then yeah, just find his email on at somewhere on his YouTube channel. I don't know, but
Yeah, it's
no, but
there.
it's there, I believe. Yeah. So anyway, that's like we've gone slightly
Yeah.
off topic, but that
I mean,
I don't.
yeah, for sure. But
I don't care. It's fine. This is what this channel is about. Let's
for
talk about
sure.
sports
Off
cars.
topic, the channel.
Yes, sport. Right, I guess
Yeah, I
sports
guess yeah.
cars.
Sports cars.
Yes,
Last segment.
last. Well, this the second to last. There is that the stupid thing at the end.
Okay,
I
that's
always
true.
like to.
Okay,
The
I'm
silly thing at the end. That
ruining
I
the format once again.
yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, absolutely. What should we? I mean, you've got you had
Yeah,
something to mention about driver weights, which I must admit I don't know a huge amount about, but I guess
yeah.
that
I
you
guess
wanted to
we
talk
could
about
talk
it. So,
about Bahrain. I don't think we did last time, but I don't know if
well,
there's really anything much to. Well, there's a lot to say about various things, but
mm, yeah, I must admit I only watched some bits of the Bahrain race. I was the problem.
fair enough.
I mentioned this. What was it? It was probably it'll be in one of the like the unreleased segments that we might release at some point in the
Don't
future.
spoil it.
Okay, right. This will be in an unreleased thing that will be never be released again.
There
That's
we
it.
go.
Yeah, it will keep it secret. It's totally not from a practice run we did, but I guess I did tell you in one of those things where a while ago, which basically I said that if I had to get rid of a circuit on the calendar, it would be
Oh yeah,
Bahrain
that
because
is true.
Bahrain hasn't. It's I don't for F1 fantastic circuit, but for WEC I just don't ever recall seeing a race that totally I got me fully excited. So I prioritized. I think I prioritized. The Brazilian Grand Prix was the same weekend as that, right? I'm pretty sure it was. So no, I might
It
prioritize
was. It
that.
was.
Ah, okay, yeah. I with WEC is fantastic, and the new hypercars are brilliant, but I still prioritized the Brazilian Grand Prix. So,
I
or
mean,
actually no,
in
Sao Paulo Grand
fairness
Prix.
though, the race was on Saturday and qualifying was rained out, so you had no excuse not to not watch. But
But I mean, it's
but anyway,
it,
it
it
was an
was
interesting
almost like
race. I think in the end it was sort of and it was nice to see uh Peugeot did better in this race, although they were helped by some safety cars and stuff like that. I think one of the biggest things was the Toyota was sort of like limping along. It had an issue, but even when it was limping along, it was still faster than. I mean, it was slower, but it was still so far ahead than. I Toyota should have easily won that race. They qualified 1 and 2. They had issues at the start of the race, and getting past and other issues. But they should have won, and they did win. So it's
yeah.
fair enough. They made it it was the hard way, the extremely hard way. And again, it's WEC, so it's one of those things where I wish it was more satisfying than it was. I mean, the racing on track, I think, actually was overall pretty good.
Oh, I'll have to
So
watch it back then on YouTube. So
yeah, the
yeah.
racing, I think, on the actual track was pretty good. yeah, it was more exciting than I originally thought. Like originally when I thought, as I said, Toyota's qualify 1-2, this is just going to be a walkover. It wasn't a walkover. It was, they made it ridiculously hard. But you know, overall still, I think the balance is still, it's it's pretty good. I remember seeing there was a chart I saw on Reddit someone made. Maybe I'll find the link to it of, you know, the relative car performance to each
Mm.
other,
Oh, okay, yeah,
and
makes sense.
it seems like the overall groupings of how fast each car has gotten tighter, which is good overall the year, which is, you know, what you want, and sort of, you know, implies that the balance is sort of working to make
Mm.
things closer. I still think that the Toyota and the Ferrari and the Porsche are clearly the three strongest cars,
Mm.
and some of it is experience, some of it is, you know, obviously but even Ferrari, you know, Ferrari should have the same amount of experience as, you know, Cadillac, and Ferrari always seemed like they were quicker even at the very beginning, and that always bothered me that they came in with such a huge amount of speed, but it seemed like they were tempered more. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Overall, I would say the balance was definitely better. I think the strongest cars were still towards the front, which, you know, you would expect. Although I will say
Yeah.
BMW definitely improved quite a bit, and I think they're, you know, I think they might be the next strongest. I mean, Cadillac I think is very fast, but they're sort of erratic because they only have one car. But
Yes.
you know, I think BMW actually have stepped up quite a bit, and I think overall they've actually moved into pretty good position.
Yeah.
So yeah,
From
I'm.
what I did see, I can't remember which one it was. But one of them was up in sort of like the higher positions for quite a while. It's certainly
Mhm.
on race speed. They're looking
Yeah,
better than they used to. I
for
think
sure.
the qualifying at Le Mans, prior to ignoring the hyperpole thing. What was it? It was a
Hmm.
15 car. That that they're clearly showing some gains. I think
Hmm.
it's only in IMSA, winning the Indy 6 hours was, or Battle of the Bricks as it
Hmm.
was called. I think that's, I mean, weather may have had a part to play, but still still clearly a good result all the
For
same.
sure. They look
So,
definitely. They're definitely getting a handle of the car and figuring out more. And yeah, performance is coming with it, so which
yeah.
that's good to see. I hope that continues, and in the new year, you know, they'll
Oh yeah.
figure out. So
More.
anyway, but the real thing that I want to talk about was the uh, the driver weight thing, which is
Yes.
they were talking more and more. There's been other, you know, discussions about, you know, F1 when F1 drivers want to pop in for like the 24 hours or whatever. They mentioned, you know, that the weight thing is like a big thing, and I think uh, I think Verstappen said that he's like, oh yeah, I really want Yuki as my co-driver because he's tiny, and when he gets in the car, he'll just be, you know, 20 kilograms lighter than me, and that'll be worth a few tenths and stuff like that. I will
Mm,
say, I think, you know, in an actual race condition, it matters less because there's so much going on. You're passing traffic, etc. So it's, you know,
yeah.
there's more variance to the lap times anyway. But I think it is an issue. Right now, they're doing nothing, as far as I know. The cars weighed separately, and, you know, whatever the driver is, whether they're small or large, you know, that's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's a disadvantage for sure. So that leads into an issue in qualifying, especially, which just means that basically the lightest driver on the team is the one that does qualifying every time, because then the tenths really do matter and you have more of a clear track. So it just means like a certain driver will just do qualifying every time, because why would the heavier driver have any reason to? So I think they are talking about at least balancing the weight in qualifying, which would be
Yeah.
something. Um,
Yeah.
in
That would make.
LMP1, in I think it was in 2015, they started doing a driver balancing, which was if they took like the three drivers and or how many drivers there were, but there's three usually, and they average the weight of the three, and if the average was below 75 or something like that, then they ballasted it up to 75
Yeah.
to like increase. So like if there's the average was like 73, they would add 2 kilograms to the car or whatever. Um, I think that's better than doing nothing. And in some ways, it's makes the driver that is the heaviest even slower. But it's something. It's not ideal, but obviously, if we were really, they mentioned in it too that they looked at maybe like having some kind of, when the driver changes, the weight changes in the car, but they determined that it was too complicated. Most of the suggestions I've seen have been like, oh yeah, like the seat insert could be weighted. I'm like, maybe that would work, but it would be heavy and be pretty difficult to get in a tight space.
No, it's because one of the things that you mentioned, that, like, whilst I'm not entirely familiar with this, I was thinking because I remember there was an article, I think it was about James Collado, and he was unwell for a time. I think it was in Qatar because he was trying to get his weight down, or to try and be lighter, I guess, for the reasons
Yeah,
that
that was sort
have
of
been
the
outlined.
impetus of this whole discussion, which
Yeah,
was
it was because
him
of
saying that
that.
he's
But I
was
was
underweight.
Yeah, but because you said, because I was going to suggest that if this was like if this was an issue, and obviously having drivers get unwell because they're trying so hard to make sure they get their own body weight down because it may increase performance. My thinking was, could there be a system where you have like some kind of mandatory, like a ballast box that you'd keep somewhere, let's say in the passenger seat of the car, or like where there would be a passenger seat, obviously, not that there's two seats in the car. And then you put it where that would be located, and then you obviously you weigh the driver however much, and then you put, actually no, let's say before a race, you sort of weigh out each driver, and then you kind of see who's the heaviest, and then the lighter drivers get like respective weights put inside this box, which is well, actually no, you could have like three separate ballast boxes, for example. Take, say, Colado's one out, and then put, I don't know, Fuoco's one in instead.
Mm-hmm.
Then when he gets in the car, and then you kind of, I'm sort of seeing what, could they in theory do that as an idea to try and sort of, I say prevent this, even though in my opinion that I say in my opinion, I know that obviously you're looking for any advantage you can, but I think when you get to that sort of level, when you kind of, when drivers are getting to this kind of level, I think it's it's a little bit. I mean, I feel sorry for poor James, obviously, because that's can't have been pleasant at all.
For
But
sure.
I
Yeah,
mean, surely just having like some kind of mechanism to try and at least make it as equal as possible, so it's that a driver doesn't have to, obviously stay fit, clearly, but
mm,
not have to worry about, they have to sort of lose weight, rather than just sort of,
mm-hmm.
just stay physically strong rather than anything like that. So,
Yeah, I'm
but
sure that,
then you said it
I
was
mean,
too
they're already working.
complicated.
Yeah, so I think they have discussed something like that. Maybe like some kind of like, I know in karting they have like some kind of ring system, so you like a donut. It's like stack the weights on top of each other on like a central pole. But anyway, there is probably a way to do it, of being like, if you had an extra person, like an extra team member doing that when the driver swaps, maybe that would be doable. But so I suspect, I think they'll definitely do the weight balancing and qualifying. In the race, I think that they maybe won't, or maybe they'll try to think of something else that we haven't thought
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
So
It's not because it's not necessarily. I mean, obviously. driver weights in itself is obviously weight in general is clearly important for performance in that respect, but I think it's trying to sort of like find a workable solution that doesn't cause, like, because I guess there's the other aspect of if you introduce this, then especially in sort of an endurance environment. I mean, imagine like you're at the Le Mans 24 hours, and then it's say like 4 a.m. in the morning, and then you have you're swapping out drivers, and let's say you then put Fuoco's driver weight increase instead of the other, like basically you put the incorrect driver weight ballast box in, or whatever, then you may get a penalty for that. And I guess there's that aspect of, well, human error could quite easily come into play, and then if that's the case, do you like how would you penalize that? Because I mean, for example, if your car is underweight, then you get, well, in a lot of series, disqualification is usually a sort of thing. But then, if with that sort of thing, surely disqualification would be rather extreme. So, do you then just say a penalty, like a time penalty, stop and go? There's a lot. I guess there's that aspect as well as when you're thinking, well, how can you, I guess, enforce that, so to speak? I mean, I guess you can only have so many WEC officials in each pit area or like each pit team, whatever. So yeah, I see. It's an issue, but you're right. It's not perhaps as well. Maybe there's on paper you'd think there'd be a straightforward solution, but it's like, well, actually, when you think about logistics, there isn't
Logistics,
really a
and
whole
you
lot.
want it to be safe and
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
possible to do right. So obviously you don't want a bunch of weight flying around. So
Oh yeah,
I can
exactly.
see why it could be a safety
Yeah.
issue when you're talking about quick change sort of things. So
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
it's an issue for them to think about, and I'm interested to hear what they come up with.
Yeah, I'm intrigued about it. I'm intrigued from that aspect, and also intrigued from sort of, I guess, to sort of learn more about the impacts of it, so to speak. I think there's loads of, I guess there's some, I guess I was about to say far-reaching consequences, but I think that's a bit extreme. But I mean, it's interesting to sort of see where this sort of thing goes from now on. Earlier on, obviously, I mean, we were sort of referencing about the slightly tightening up of the pack of the hypercar grid in the WEC, but there was one brand that we neglected to mention, and that brand. Well, since we did our previous episode, there are potentially more solid reports of Lamborghini not being in the WEC next season. It's not been officially confirmed as of this recording, or as we are doing this, but I mean, am I going to say I'm going to miss them for if this is indeed true that they're not going to be in WEC? Am I going to miss them? Yes. However, I will say that if it's on the basis that if they're going to go back to IMSA and they're going to enhance, like, going to make a bigger presence in IMSA with their hypercar, then if it means that they'll learn more in a slightly better, like, obviously it's a bit more cost effective series in a way for Lamborghini, and they can justify spending, a full season entry and a sort of Michelin Endurance Cup entry at the same time. So, yeah, if they did it like that, I mean, I could accept that them in all likelihood missing Le Mans for next year, and if it meant that they got better from the North American scene, and let's say they do better than they expect in IMSA, and they say win a race potentially, then it might give them the more reason to think, well, you know what, we're making progress. We'll keep our commitment in IMSA, and we might head back to WEC. So I
Mm.
don't. I mean, it's not good, but then at the same time, I'm thinking, Lamborghini exiting isn't. It's not going to be like earth-shatteringly terrible for hypercar, or it's
No,
not going to be like the downfall of hypercar. That it's like the end of
definitely
the.
not.
I don't think it's certainly not anything like that. So
No,
I mean, the
especially
Aston
since
Martin.
Hyundai
Yeah,
and Aston Martin are coming in, so it's not really you know
exactly. So
devastating loss.
yeah,
You know,
and it could
so
come back. So
and it could go back. So it's yeah, that's I think overall, I think an IMSA would be way better if it well, not way better, but I think way better for Lamborghini if it competed in IMSA, got more attention, could potentially win a race. You never know. Safety cars, etc. Yellow flags in IMSA gives everyone a chance. So you know, I think and they could develop the car more. I think the issue is who the heck is going to run it, and because if Iron Lynx is not happy running the car, though it's also run by Prema, is doing the technical managing. But you know, if Iron Lynx is really as unhappy with Lamborghini as supposedly they are, uh, you know, it could be. I don't really know how it will be run at all, but you know, it's a little bit in chaos. But I guess we will, you know, find out. I guess.
it's interesting. I find it interesting that this is sort of this weekend's postseason sort of Daytona test that the Lamborghini hypercar is there, and it's still, as far as I can tell, is being run by Iron Lynx.
Yeah,
So I mean, I don't know if it's because they're contractually obligated to like, you know, they must complete the end of this year with to sort of finish off what they're meant to do contractually, and then well, even if there is anything contractually that says that they have to do anything, then maybe all these reports could be, you know, untrue, and that actually Iron Lynx and Lamborghini are getting on like one big happy family. But I guess it's some ways in some ways it's interesting that they are still doing this particular test. But then I guess there's the question of who would run that car next year. I mean, there's that you may Chip Ganassi would in some ways make sense in the sense that obviously they've just come off of a program in top level sports cars. They might have some spare staff who obviously some of it was devoted to so the IndyCar and then the IMSA project, and some of that's gone to what will be a new Indy Lights project. And maybe if they've still got enough staff, maybe they could do a North American only run with the Lamborghini if that was true. But then I guess you'd imagine that Chip Ganassi would want to sort of, you know, there'd be a cost that would
they would want
that
money,
would
a lot
they'd
of money, and I
they'd probably
think
want that. Yeah.
Lamborghini would not be willing to pay what
Mm.
Chip Ganassi Racing
So,
would
but and then
demand.
yeah, and then so I guess there's. I mean, I've tried to think of many. I mean, I think Brian Herter is out of the question as well because I think they could be in with a chance of doing the Hyundai project, at least on the North American
Mhm,
side.
for sure. Genesis,
So,
yeah.
um, I mean, I had thought of maybe like because I mean, and they're not as popular now, but or say popular. Popular is the wrong word, but you know they're not as perhaps as notified
Active.
or notifiable as they used to be. Words fail me once
Mhm.
again, but Grasser. Um, but you know it's been. I know they haven't done anything like a prototype or anything like that, but
Yeah,
they
I
have
think
had.
that's really their only shot is with a team that's sort of making the step up. So maybe they won't be as expensive
Yeah,
because they're sort of just starting out.
yeah, that's
You're
true.
taking more of a risk with the team,
Mm,
you know, it's sort of like double-edged sort of. You're gonna want to save money on this running the car, but you're also gonna get a maybe more inexperienced team that won't be able to develop the cars
mm,
as well. If
yeah,
you spend money on Chip Ganassi Racing, I think that'll probably be a pretty well sorted car by the end of the year.
yeah, exactly.
So you
It's
get what you pay for.
yeah.
So
Just another name came just sort of popped into my head, and that Yoast potentially. I mean,
for sure.
obviously they're familiar with the Volkswagen owned brands, but I mean, it has been a while. I guess I don't know if they're doing anything at the moment. I don't think they are. Maybe they'll. I mean, obviously I mean, what is there to say? They're definitely a very successful outfit, let's put it that way. But I mean, maybe they'll want to sort of dip their toe into the new era of endurance sports car racing, and maybe Lamborghini would be a way to go. But again, I imagine they pay some, or they did have to pay some money to them as well. So it's I don't. Well, I mean, maybe they'd be a bit better because they may not have, because they don't
Hmm.
have, as far as I'm aware, any projects. Well,
No,
they're
I
not
think the
really
Glickenhaus
running.
House was really their last
Yeah.
things.
I guess maybe they could. Maybe that would make a bit more sense as they're actively available. I mean, I guess I mean, there's other LMP2, like LMP2 teams that might come into hypercar at some point, or that sort of thing. But I don't know. I don't. It's because the thing is, there's no. I mean, well, obviously on paper you'd pick Chip Ganassi, but then the more you think about it, then that comes with its own different sort of impacts and so on. So it's like there's not really an obvious choice that would. Well, I mean, some people would like to say, oh, let's see if we can get J Lock, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that was. I mean, that's
It's gonna
that's.
happen, everybody. You heard it here first. Breaking news: J-Lock takes over
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
Lamborghini
there we go.
GTP and
Yeah,
program.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
It's happening. Everybody,
real.
quote this podcast. It's
Yes,
100% real.
yes, absolutely. There's there's no sarcasm. Only the real stuff on this show. We only get. Oh no! To be honest, that's just fan. Wait, it's in like fantasy dreams and all that sort of thing, and we hope maybe in the future if like I don't mean, do they actually still exist in like a racing capacity? I imagine there's still a Japanese Lamborghini owners club, but do they still race? I imagine if they do, it's Super GT, I guess. I don't know.
That is a question. I do not
That's a good.
know.
Oh, you don't know?
I
Okay,
don't know
fair
myself.
enough. That will have to be in the edit, which I will put over at
There
some
we go.
point. Right. I think we've talked about all the subjects. All we've got to do now is the silly bit. Well, I say the silly bit. I always like to. Well, say we always. This is only the second episode, but I think this might become
We've
the.
always done it for one previous time.
Oh, yes. uh, my, like I say, my choice of words sometimes. I know what I mean. They just come out in. They can sometimes come out in a way which means something else. But that being said, so we've talked about a whole load of different high level racing series in this episode. But I think we really and truly the best racing that you can get is in sort of small little boxes going around, racing their hearts out. I think this series in the Renault Twingo Cup is where it's really at. But yeah, there we go. Great series. Don't really watch enough of it because I don't think it's all that well publicised. However, that being said, when you race at Misano, I don't think even in the Renault Twingo Cup you expect a lead battle to end up where you have two cars ending up on their side in quite a as strange a way as that. I mean, I will say that both drivers are okay, but it was like also what makes the clip that moment kind of. I'm not gonna say funny because you don't it's two cars on its side is not necessarily what you want to say, but it's like the sound of the commentators. It's like their mics kind of break at the moment. It's like partly I don't know if it's because of like they're kind of reacting to how the situation happens, but it's sort of like it's sort of like then going, oh my word, what's going on? There's two cars on its side, and they're trying
Mike's
to
peaked.
their mics peaked. Then they just sort of this kind of like sounding at the like the sort of bottom of the ocean sound effect. But it's oh no, again it's
We need to put in that other clip from the press conference of that our Steph, he posted something because when we're talking about a previous podcast, he said he's sounded not the best. And he posted a clip from an F1 press conference where they Schumacher and and Vettel, Michael Schumacher, they pranked Rosberg by like putting his mic close to his mouth so that it went extra loud and distorted when it didn't need to be.
Yeah, like I don't know I don't know how this is going to sound, but like really, really close to the mic in a really unnecessary way. I don't know if that audio was really weird for you, but I was really trying to like.
No, it actually sounded just fine.
Oh, did it? Oh well, this mic is too good for goodness sake. Oh right. But yeah, I was trying to emphasize that the mic was getting really like basically trying to make a distorted effect, but clearly didn't do that.
I would say this is where you insert the press conference audio, but not the video, so it doesn't get copyrighted on YouTube.
Yeah, maybe I might. I'll probably just have to. I'll just have to put a link in. I'll put a link in the video in the description.
Yeah, I
think some of you will probably know. Probably know what you're referring to. It's like one of the most, probably like one of the best press conference moments that there's ever been, and including the long question as well. Like, well, we've had a couple of the long questions in the Abu Dhabi broadcast. Sorry, press conference. So, but yeah, no, it's. I mean, we've somehow linked two Renault Twingos having an accident to mic audio. But anyway, with that being said, I think we're going to withdraw the code 60 from now on. We've probably even gone a bit over the hour mark of where we normally try and name for these podcasts, but never mind. That's just part of it. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, Lombo, before we round these off. No. Okay, I'll do this. I'll do this every episode, and like either you or Steph or whoever's on, like maybe one day they'll actually have something they instead of saying no, I'm good. You just finish it off. Like maybe one day I'll like my courtesy will eventually reap some reward. But no, it's all right. If you don't have anything to say, you don't have anything to say. But I do, and that is if you did enjoy it, then I guess like and subscribe. Although that being said, if you have any sort of thoughts about the podcast or any of the subjects that you've heard, or just sort of in general, if there's any improvements we can make, we're always open to any constructive criticism, of course. And also, I guess in a sort of it's not really a side thing, but in the future we are hoping to get sort of some, I guess, guests, whether they be racing drivers, members of teams, or other content creators of who do racing or racing gaming content even. If you have any suggestions, then again, say in the comments and we'll do our best. We'll do our best to get them on and so on. But yeah, I think that'll round things off for this particular one. So yes, thank you very much for watching or listening or however you've sort of digested the content that you have been listening to for a while. But until the next podcast or video, whatever that may be kind to each other and enjoy the rest of your day.